We still have another panel going on downstairs in the forum space. But I know we'll have people join us as the conversation goes on. Hi. This has been so wonderful. And over the 2 days, we've come to the last of our panel discussions. I don't even want to call them panel discussions because I feel like they're so much richer than that. And after this last discussion, we actually have a chef's dinner upstairs. Incredible women chefs from all over the world, some in our network who've come and have made incredible food for you with wine pairings. So please be sure to go up to the 6th floor and the 7th floor, which is not to be missed either if you haven't yet been there. As many of you know, Vital Voices has been doing our work for 25 years. And when we first started our work, there was no real research, no data that said that investing in women is actually financially, just an imperative, right? There wasn't that research. But today we have more research, we have more allies, we have more data, we have more awareness than we've ever had before, showing us that yes, absolutely, it's important to move the needle. But really, until we change hearts and minds, until we can truly change culture, the way that people think about and value women, we cannot really change. We cannot really get to gender equality. I see Panmela Castro here. Panmela is an incredible graffiti artist, and Arthi with her. Panmela is one of the women in our network who really taught me this lesson. And because of that, Panmela, that is why we named the gallery space on the 1st floor that I hope all of you have visited after you and Samar Manala Khan. Because of the lessons that you taught us on the power of arts. She does graffiti art. First, she started off in the favelas of Rio because she was angry. She never knew there was a law on the books or that domestic violence was a crime. And she was angry and she wanted people to know. And so she took to the streets with, her armed with her spray paint cans, and she went to work, slowly educating. She has now, in the 10 years, more than that actually, 2009, 14 years, 13 years we've known each other, she's become a worldwide sensation. And her art has just gotten better and better. And anyway, so this next discussion is very much inspired by you and Samar. And we are first going to start off with a one-on-one conversation between two phenomenal women. Selena Tabakawala, one of our board members, who is just the ultimate tech entrepreneur, and she's going to tell you more. And Martine Rothblatt, a newer member of our board who is just an absolute phenomenon. And again, I want her to tell her story, but these are two extraordinary tech leaders who just push the envelope and make me realize how transformative technology can be and how much more we need to utilize it as a movement. So the conversations over these next two panels are really about how do we utilize technology, the arts, culture, and innovation to really transform culture. So we're really looking forward. Before I bring them out, we are going to show a short film, but before I do that, as you all know, it is no easy task to pull off a gathering like this with as many conversations as I told them we've got to do. It is no easy task to pull that off. So I want to thank, where is Leslie Warren? She's always lurking. Leslie Warren, yes. And Linda Roth, don't hide, Linda, she's hiding. And their entire team. Can I ask everyone from their team to stand, please? Where are you all? Come on. Where are you all? They're probably working so hard. Oh, okay. Marquette, who you're going to hear from tomorrow in conversation with Bose. So if you're coming tomorrow, and we would love it, we're going to have some great things tomorrow. But thank you guys, because you can only imagine how very stressful it is while construction's going on to be planning a major festival. But I couldn't be prouder, really, truly. So we're going to move into a film now and into these final two discussions.
There have always been women creating change. Bold leaders leaders who weren't always welcome.
It's been difficult for us to be heard.
I am aware of all the women who are still in silence.
From our beginning, Vital Voices recognized the need for women leaders to be heard, from community meetings to the highest seats of power. For more than 2 decades, we've searched the world for those leaders. We've partnered with 18,000 of them to build the skills and networks they need to soar. We've learned women lead differently, using their power to empower others, not themselves. And that difference is precisely what is needed now, more than ever. The world faces extraordinary challenge. But there are women leaders who walk among us with bold and innovative solutions, waiting for their moment. Now is the time to stand up. Be fearless in the face of those who say you can't. Be daring and unconventional because you can. Take a bold step to create the world you want to live in. At Vital Voices, we celebrate women leaders who dare to challenge the status quo. Together, we will solve the world's greatest challenges with bold ideas and bold action. Join us.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great afternoon. Oops. So we wanted to kick off today talking about entrepreneurship. I'm going to actually turn it over to you, Martine, first. We heard downstairs about how so much social entrepreneurship is started by women. And also when you look at women entrepreneurs, so many of them started based on their personal journey. I'd love to kick off. Tell us your story. What made you start United Therapeutics and where you are?
Sure. Thank you so much for being part of this panel and sitting up here with me. The encouragement. So our youngest daughter, whose name is Genesis, she was diagnosed with a fatal illness when she was 5 years old. And the illness was called primary pulmonary hypertension. And what happens with this disease is that all of the blood vessels in your lungs, and just your lungs, they close down for no explicable reason. And the heart keeps trying to pump blood through them, but much less blood can go through because the vessels are closed down, and the people's lips turn blue. They faint and fall, and then finally the right heart just gives up and fails. So when she was diagnosed with this illness, everybody said it was fatal, nothing could be done about it, and it was very intimidating. The head of cardiology at Children's National Medical Center here in Washington, D.C., Dr. Roger Ruckman, he said, there's nothing you can do. I've seen 3 kids. It affects like 3 out of 4 patients are female, and they've all died. So, I just think that we did not want to accept no for an answer. And I always remember the words of Katharine Hepburn that she said, when she hears something is impossible, she breaks it into 2 words, I'm possible. And I thought, there might be a way to make a medicine that could help Genesis. I went to pharmaceutical companies. They were all run by men. They said, it's not possible. Even if it was possible, there was no money to be made because this was what they call an orphan disease. Very few people have it. Only 3,000 people had it in all of the United States. So I just took the approach of, I will do this, find this medicine as a foundation, and I won't worry about the profits. Today, that foundation has turned into what's called a public benefit company. It means that the revenues and profits are no more important than the patients, than the community, than the people working in the supply chain, and then the planet. All of those things are of equal importance. Whenever somebody has not had the money to pay for our medicines, we always give it to them for free. And again, many people, the whole kind of patriarchal pharmaceutical structure, said this is an impossible business model, you'll never succeed. But in fact, our daughter Genesis is now 35 years old. She's a beautiful, beautiful young lady. She works in our company, and she says she wants to, and she has always wanted to, because she wants to help other people like so many other people have helped her. And thousands of other patients have been helped. We've never turned away anyone for inability to pay for the medicine. All of our largest facilities are now zero carbon footprint, so we take very seriously our commitment to the planet, to the community. And I think it has been like a very good example of you don't have to follow the patriarchal industrial model. You can follow a different model and still be very successful.
Wow, that's an amazing story. It's hard for me to follow that, given my first company was helping people throw parties with e-bikes, so not precisely as that. So let's talk about social change. We've seen technology really impact social change, and in some ways, when you look at, when you think about social media, Facebook, Twitter, you can say that's positive social change or negative social change, but it's definitely impacted social change. And now, I've gotten a little bit into the Web3 space, and I'm actually working on an all-volunteer project to create NFTs for Ukraine. And you see a lot in this Web3 space, a lot of people who are trying to raise capital for good causes and looking at new structures with technology to try to drive social change with community. But in the healthcare side, there's been so much advancements in the tech to drive social change as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think, social media is probably the greatest accelerant to improving the world that there's ever been, because there's finally a way for us all to connect with each other rather than being kind of intermediated by concentrators of communication, such as big media. Used to be like the concentrator, and now we can go like peer-to-peer, person-to-person, everywhere in the world. So I'm a huge fan of social media. I think it's been absolutely transformative for human society. And one of the things that's been perhaps like most amazing to me is the number of other mothers I've met who have started companies now. I mean, there are literally dozens of them to cure diseases that afflict their children. And they would have never, known it was possible had they not, seen somebody talking about United Therapeutics and my journey on Facebook or Insta, whatever. It was through social media that they found this story, that they shared this story with other people. And I think there is kind of like a grassroots movement now that says that we can use the decentralized tools of social media. We can even use, Web 3.0 kind of tools to kind of create decentralized autonomous organizations that can take charge of developing, say, a cure for some rare disease. And people who don't even know each other personally can buy into this DAO and become part of that effort. So I actually believe that social media, and especially like Web 3.0, is going to deconstruct a lot of the structures that have kept us apart from each other for so long.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's also been, though, a lot of criticism of some of the social media around what their responsibility is towards the discussion and everything happening on those platforms. And obviously with, Musk bid for Twitter at this point, there's like even more. What's your thoughts on that in terms of what's the responsibility of these organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do believe that, every tool is like a double-edged sword. And I think in a way, everything in life has like a yin and a yang side. And I love this one philosopher from the 1970s named Alan Watts, who was like a Jesuit, Buddhist, all kind of rolled into one. And he always pointed out that, there's a crest of a wave because there's a trough. You know what is good because you know what is evil. So there's always these double-sided swords. And I think of something like, fire. It's like, wow, it's amazing. It allowed us to have metal, allowed us to heat our homes, allowed us to cook our food, allowed us to make medicines. At the same time, it's been responsible for unthinkable horrors up to what's going on in Ukraine right now with people Russians dropping incendiary bombs and whatnot. So everything has a yin and yang aspect to it. Social media is no different. It's a tool, okay? And it's an amazing tool, but it's still just a tool. It could be used for great good or great harm. And how Facebook is used to engender, I'll say mini genocides in Myanmar and stuff like that. So it's up to us humans to use, one of the most amazing tools of all, which is the tools of language, law, ethics. Those are also tools. Those have also been used for good and for harm, okay? But it's up to us to make sure we use the beneficent potential of law and ethics to control the use of the social media tool so that it's used for people's benefit, not for people's harm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On the software side, we have a lot of discussions around artificial intelligence and the ethics of using technology and artificial intelligence. I was chatting with one of my friends who works at one of the, big companies where you talk to a device. We'll just leave it at that. And he was saying is as people reveal stuff to the device, what is their responsibility? So if somebody says, I committed a crime, what is the responsibility of the technology companies, And that crime could be, I took an abortion bill in a place where it's illegal. That crime could be, I just, had domestic abuse. And what is a technologies company's responsibility as they're listening to all this stuff? I know there's similar ethical questions that come up in the health side and the healthcare space side. Tell us a little bit about both what you think the health companies' responsibilities are, as well as what innovations you're seeing on that side.
Sure. So there has been, for a while, a concept of medical ethics and bioethics. And lately I've been working on this concept of geoethics. And one of our main projects right now is to create an unlimited supply of transplantable organs. Because when there are not enough organs, human behavior, when there's any kind of scarcity, human behavior gets worse. And people begin saying, oh, only these people can have the organs, only those people. So in creating an unlimited supply of transplantable organs, one of the ways that is done is using genetically modified pigs to provide hearts, kidneys, lungs, livers, etc., to people who otherwise would be dying because they can't get an organ transplant. But there is a concern that if you do this, you could possibly spread viruses or cause epidemics, and also you have to be concerned about the animal welfare and all that sort of thing. So the concept of geoethics, to me, as applied to healthcare, is that before something is being done that has an impact on the community, there should be a process of communication and interaction with the community and a consensual buy-in from the committee. There's a beautiful tool, an ethical tool, a legal tool that's been developed called Citizens' Assemblies, where anything that's going to affect a population, that a random selection of people from that population who might be affected, say people of a country or people of a state, people of a city, whatever is the population that might be affected, there's a random selection of the people brought. They are given, informational briefings by the experts on the field. They can ask whatever questions they want to ask, and they end up having a consensual decision. This citizens' assembly process was, in fact, what was behind, finally, the legalization of abortion in Ireland, something that people thought would never happen when it was there was a kind of a chokehold by the legislature, but when it came to the actual people making their decisions and they saw the pros and cons, it was legalized. So I think that before, healthcare companies make innovations that can have any kind of a material or significant impact on the population, that the population should first have an opportunity to buy into the occurrence of that impact. It's basically just a consequence of the golden rule that, like, do unto others what you would want others to do unto you. So before you affect other people, get their consent to be affected.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd say on the software side, the other big thing is thinking about the people building the software. So, I mean, we still have this massive imbalance in Silicon Valley where not only are most of the developers actually male, but even most of the machine learning is on data that has been done with males. And so you end up in a place where all the learning is biased, all of the technology being developed has that bias built into it. And so it's a question of if you actually had people with a broader demographic set thinking about these problems right from the start, you might end up with a different outcome. And that is true even if you look at some of the issues with social media. It was once they started to sort of involve a broader community, it's had a little bit better of an impact.
Yes, totally. I mean, to me, it would be obvious to any scientist studying the situation that systemic sexism is rampant, and it wouldn't be surprising because that's been a patriarchal structure for thousands of years. Systemic racism is rampant, and like you asked me as a medical person what to do about that, it's like a doctor can't treat a patient unless the doctor first has some idea what the patient's problem is, okay? And so a healer first tries to figure out, okay, what's out of balance here, and then develops a treatment. But if we live in a society that kind of denies the existence of deep, deep systemic sexism and denies the existence of deep, deep systemic racism, there's never going to be a way to flip things around and get things going in a better direction. So I just think we have to be relentless in calling out sexism, calling out racism, and only in that way, maybe there needs to be a generation or two that kind of fades away, but if we are relentless and continue the education process, I do believe that the arc of history bends towards justice, and we will get to a world where everybody is treated as an individual with full respect, and at that point, I think humanity will just blast off into hyperspace.
That's a very optimistic view. It's awesome. I think the one sort of pushback on that might be the lack of economic empowerment for women, especially when you think about less than 10% of even this new Web3 space, less than 10% of the trading volume right now is happening by women. When you look at funding, less than 15% of funding is going to women. So how do you think some of those things that are so structural, like capital sources, how do you think that you're always described as this futurist. How do you think that we can get over that hurdles as we move forward?
Yes, so I get tremendous inspiration from the past, and I love actually studying history because there's extraordinary stories of overcoming obstacles and justice advancing forward if you study the past. But the short answer to your question is we need to reach out to our allies, the people that have capital. And there are lots and lots of allies out there. And those people, if they can use their capital to share it to create a better world, I think we can balance the difference in capital. One of the historical stories is back in England during the 18th century. Slavery was not allowed in England, but English ships and English merchants were the biggest transporters of slaves across the Atlantic. And it took an individual, Olaudah Equiano, who had freed himself twice from slavery just by saving little bits of money. It took him getting to England and teaming up with an ally. In this case, it was a graduate of Cambridge, who had privilege and wealth. They teamed up and they began finding other allies. One of them was the Wedgwood family, which even today we know of Wedgwood silver And they finally got the English privileged elite, to ban the trade in slavery, which was like a first nail in the coffin of slavery per se. And mind you, slavery was something that's existed since biblical times and probably before. So they killed something, at least they put the first nail in the coffin of killing something that existed for thousands of years by a population that had no money, but allied themselves with the people that did have money. So I think all of the largely men and largely white men who have the capital, we need to reach out and enlist them as allies. If Diane von Furstenberg was here on stage with us, she would say, let's seduce them.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question. You have a wonderful phrase. I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong, but that I love. Identify the corridors of indifference and run like hell down them. Tell us, what do you mean by that?
So the corridors of indifference are the things that people are not paying attention to. And everybody kind of, tends to follow the crowd. I think it's natural to whatever is big and popular and follow the crowd. But even as a matter of just business, if you cannot be sort of like the market leader or the second market leader in a field, it will be very difficult to be successful. Yet there are many other fields that are brand new and nobody is in them. And those are what I call the corridors of indifference. In our case, it was orphan diseases. Big Pharma didn't want the orphan diseases. They wanted the blockbusters and the million-person diseases, which is fine. But there are 7,000 orphan diseases. Wow. And way more than the other kind. And as we get more advanced in genomic sequencing, we see in a very real way that there's probably like 10 billion orphan diseases because each person's genome is different and each person's body is going to unfold in a unique way. So we began looking at these orphan diseases, which were corridors of indifference. We run like hell down them because they are unmet medical needs and people need help. So, we want to use the privilege that we have of seeing the disease and having the tools to do something about it, to put our life to the best possible use and run like hell. And once that's established, we look for another corridor of indifference. So it really just means, in a business sense, it means it's kind of better to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond.
That's great. I think we're going to let the next group come up. Is that so? Just wanted to say thank you, and thank you all for listening.
My pleasure.
Let's see, what Martine did not mention is that she actually founded Sirius XM Radio before that, and then left that to begin her current company, which is incredible to me, that kind of shift. But I think that's what we find around the world is women really building these companies out of personal experience. And redefining this space, which is such an extraordinary example of. We're now going to shift from entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and technology to arts, culture, marketing to drive change. So please welcome, Gail Lamone. She's taking a selfie with somebody. Gail Lamone, come on. Gail Lamone, I am so proud to call a good friend because she is a 3-time New York Times bestseller author. She has also sold 2 of those books to major movie studios and then moved to Hollywood for a while. And all the while also is an adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. So welcome. I'll let you introduce.
If you ever want your life to sound more glamorous than it is, call Elise Nelson. We were taking pictures because, for those of you who are parents, we just figured out that someone I grew up with in Prince George's County, Maryland, is actually very good friends in the Moms Club with the amazing entrepreneur, Selena, who is just your moderator. So all moms stick together as we go into Mother's Day. I could not be more excited about this panel. I think the whole notion of art and storytelling, removing the distance between and among us, taking away the whole notion of the other, because in the end, there is no other. There's only us. And the panel that we have, we could not have more talented and incredible people, so I couldn't be more excited. Let me just say, so our first person that we're going to have come on is, because I see him first, is actually, I'm going to bring in Gutier Gupta, who's journalist and founder of the Apne App. She's someone who does everything, and she's going to tell you about the stories she tells, spends her time between India and also sometimes in New York. The next amazing person we're going to have come on is Amar Singh, who is an activist and art patron. He's also going to tell us about some of the work he's done in the LGBTQI community, and I think we're really excited to hear all about all of the work that you're undertaking. And then we have, of course, Milk, the Grammy Award-winning singer. So we have activists and art patrons and filmmakers, and then we have one of the most amazing storytellers and messaging mavens of all time, Bozoma St. John. I want to talk to you about all of the projects people have, but I will say that Bose has a book that's coming out very soon. And she will, you know, for those of you who like Amazon, I'm just saying, The Urgent Life is going to be available for pre-order this evening. So I want to start with Amar. You've created what you call, in some ways, it's an activist gallery. And the whole notion of really uplifting women and LGBTQ artists. And I wanted to ask you, when you think about your passion for these issues, how do you see the art as a channel for activism, right? Because sometimes we think of the art world as removed from activism, but your world is basically merging the two.
Well, I'll very quickly say it's such an honor to be here, and I was told earlier I'm the only man speaking at the Vital Voices Festival. And most of you are probably thinking, who the heck is this guy? So just some quick context. I come from a long line of women's rights activists. My grandmother actually spoke and championed women's education alongside Nehru, India's first Prime Minister. My ancestor, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, is still to this day considered India's greatest feminist and was a close friend of Mahatma Gandhi. She founded India's first women's education fund and rose to become India's first health minister. They were also both princesses, and you know, I actually knew my grandmother very well because she only passed in 2017. So I was always raised to champion causes and individuals, you know, who don't maybe have a platform. So that's the context about me.
And you've also made a commitment to Vital Voices. Yeah.
Pardon?
And you've also made a commitment to
Yes, and I recently made a commitment of $1 million to Vital Voices because obviously my grandmother, my ancestors, they are a wonderful inspiration, but they're not here to do the work for me. And so to lead it back into art, art is all around us. When you come into this beautiful new building, Elise has done a phenomenal job. When you come into this building, you see a phenomenal gallery celebrating women, beautiful paintings celebrating women. We have Amanda Gorman, Malala paintings over there. Art is very powerful, both in terms of an inspirational tool, but in terms of its messaging, and using art, both in terms of traditional art and the new technology of NFTs to inspire and actually change the world is always been a part of our culture. That's why when you travel the world and you go to museums, we see artifacts and beautiful paintings, murals that have existed for thousands of years. So that is why I use art as a channel to create change.
And I think it's amazing. And I think also what you've done, and I think this is what each one of you has done, is really use story to connect people to things that are happening in geographically very close distances, but that may be worlds apart. And that is truly what only art, what only storytelling can do in removing that. I want to go to Mir. You performed in 2017 your song Quiet at the Women's March, and it became an instant success, and one that I'm sure most everybody in this room knows. And you followed that with Somebody's Beloved, following the brutal murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. How do you think about how social upheaval shapes your music? And also, can you tell us about something you just told me? We were talking about how you create art, and you were talking about you were just at a march this week.
Yeah, well, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Elise, for inviting me up here. Yeah, art and social upheaval work hand in hand. I think art is a beautiful way for people to engage in self-agency. I think when crises like this that are happening this week makes us feel like we've lost control and there's little for us to do, we can feel powerless. But when we engage in creating something, and it doesn't have to be a painting, it doesn't have to be music, it can be writing, it could be dancing, it could be anything that feels like you, in the beginning, before you engage in the activity, there was nothing, you engage in it, and then there was something. And I think that act of creating creates this sense of calm because I am creating and controlling this moment. And I guess you could say we're channeling the universe through us. It can help calm us. And so what I did this week for myself, for my own mental health, when we heard about the Roe v. Wade news, the leak, I went to the Supreme Court stairs and videotaped the protesters, and there was some of the chants that were so visceral that like made my voice leap out of my chest, and one was like, "We won't go back." And like usually some chants I'm like taking time to learn, you know, but this one just like leapt out of me. I was like, "Yeah, we won't go back." And so then I filmed that and then took the audio from it, and all of this is to calm my nerves, you know, because it's a stressful time, and but also it's a hopeful time because I think all of this is happening because we are making progress, and so the forces are fearful, and so they're pulling. There's this like tug of war. So when I engage in taking the voices of this march and then or this protest, and I put song to it, I put drums and guitar, and then wrote melody to it, and I'm inviting people on social media. I've made the second verse blank so that fans on social media can engage, and so people are sending me lyrics, you know, and actually their lyrics, some of them are better than mine. So I'm like, okay, yeah, because I'm just like learning. It's like this interactive learning through social media. It's so life-giving because social media can feel life-draining a lot of times, and I struggle with it. But when I lock into how can I create stuff with the people on the other side of the screen, everything comes alive for me. And that's how I think the social upheaval and the art can dance together, because it's all meant to grow us, and we're absolutely growing right now, and I can feel it as a culture, and like in this space, the conversations we're having are deeper, you know, and more people are sending me their lyrics, and they're getting more vulnerable. It's really incredible.
Well, it's so moving to be here with all of you at this moment, and I think there's probably nobody who knows marketing and the power of messages more personally, more powerfully than Bose. And I would just want to ask you, especially as you think about, you have a book coming out that's deeply personal and deeply vulnerable, how do you think about somebody who both knows messaging and has been a huge champion, an unabashed champion of women and girls, about what is working, what is most powerful right now, what is connecting, and really what moves people?
Oy, well, that's a very heavy question. You know, I kind of fell into marketing, to be totally honest. I'm a child of immigrants, so first-gen American. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, maybe an accountant if everything else failed. I have so disappointed them. But my sister's a lawyer, so I kind of put it all on her, you know what I'm saying? But in any case, when I got into marketing, it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and The kind of storytelling we were doing then was like, you know, sort of big, iconic pop culture type of messaging, you know? And I saw the power of associating a brand with a person and having them sort of champion. And then we started putting in what we started calling the morality clause into their contracts, so that should they do something wrong in the world, we could quickly leave them by the roadside and continue on. And I found that to be so interesting because it's like, look, the connectivity between a person's story, their connection with the brand, and therefore delivering it to a community of people or to society is so strong that we ended up having to figure out how to disassociate ourselves should that go back. Like, that is such a powerful thought. And also the fact that marketing is the most prolific way that we have told stories over time. Elise and I have had, Elise, we keep pointing to you. I mean, you should just be on this panel. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
But
we'll just cold call her.
I know, right? Exactly. But she and I have talked, you know, about the fact that, again, as a first-gen American, one of the biggest marketing fails of all time, actually it was very successful, I just call it a fail, was the campaign in the 70s and 80s of Africa and African children, right? The campaign that said, this person is worth 1 cent. And you would get a picture, they'd put it on the wall or on the fridge, and then everyone would say, ah, this person is worth 1 cent. And so then, of course, what did that tell us? As we all grew up with these commercials playing constantly, that you associate those people as lesser than you, right? And so thinking about the plight of women, and especially women of color in the world, and how to tell stories in a way that is going to make us, you know, equal, just equal, not even better than, but we know that we are. You know what I'm saying? I'm just looking for equality today. Right, exactly. I mean, because the fashions. But in any case, just even getting to the point where we are talking about the perception of women and girls in the world who have not had the ability to have their stories told in affirmative, aspirational ways. And we're talking about the 30-second stories, the 60-second stories, the little bitty things that you see constantly. Like, how can we do that better? And so I am very much interested today in how to continue to do that, putting the stories into, yes, the big, big brand campaigns, but also how to do it on the small scale so that the constant story is not that you should feel sorry, not that we're, you know, out here trying to deliver poverty porn, but that we are actually trying to affirm the stories of many, many, many types of people.
And that is, I think, the whole notion of what storytelling can do, right? You can't count what you don't see. You don't invest in things that are invisible. If we don't see 360, if we don't see everything that's happening, you will never be able to count and never be able to invest as a whole person, right? You'll never be able to really see who and what are all around you. And so part of what I think the work is that each of you do is opening the aperture and saying, hey, all that whole narrative of the victim stuff, that actually, we didn't write that, right? You know, that let's rewrite the narratives and reshape the whole conversation. I think that's so much of the work that you're doing. I want to go to Rajira. You have done storytelling in ways that Boris was just talking about, in ways that you know, this entire kind of panel is really about documentaries and journalism and really thinking through this whole narrative of moving hearts. Why do you think that moving hearts leads to moving minds? And tell us about that journey as you make it.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Elise, for including me in this beautiful panel. When Gail said that there is no other, there's only us, I felt so connected and exactly what we should be thinking about in this moment, even as we advocate to fight to preserve us. when so much is being dismantled and so much is being created as we go along. So my own journey was as a journalist. I used to see inequality around me. I grew up in a city called Calcutta, which has some of the most extreme poverty on the planet. And I wanted to do something about it. So I thought, okay, I'll make this, what I see around me, visible. And that's why I chose to become a journalist. And I started writing for my school newspaper, then for the local newspaper, and eventually ended up making a documentary on the subject of sex trafficking from Nepal to Bombay. I saw rows of villages when I was hiking in Nepal which had missing girls. And I wanted people to understand that this is not normal, because a lot of people would say, oh, prostitution is as old as the hills, or men will be men. And I would say not the rape of a 15-year-old. So how to make that person human was my quest. And that's how I ended up making the documentary, The Selling of Innocence, won an Emmy for it. And that's when I met Elise and everyone at Vital Voices, when it was just a dream and an idea. We got together at Airlie Hall and thought about how can we elevate women's voices. And I had just screened the documentary at the UN and met with Madeleine and Swanee Hunt and the others. And together we used the documentary to actually push for change on the Hill. By screening the documentary, going and testifying in the Hill, and getting a bipartisan bill with Wellstone and Brownback on trafficking, which is now the trafficking law in the US. And through... So I actually experienced the power of storytelling. I did it because I believed in it and then saw the truth of it. And since then, I've just continued on that same journey by trying to speak up for those who are invisible through any which ways I can, through my NGO, where we bring out a newspaper called Red Light Dispatch, and my NGO is called Apne Aap, but also through painting, and I have brought some paintings for the Vital Voices office today to bring hope. And I made these paintings during COVID because I thought that we must understand that there are people who are promising us a future in outer space. There are people who are promising us a future in a better future in the future. But we have something which is beautiful right now, and there's a garden still on earth, is what I believe. And so my paintings are now about that garden which is still here, and how can we hold on to it. And you know, the third thing I do is write. So I'm just finished a book for Scholastic about a young girl being groomed for prostitution, and how she becomes a kung fu champ and saves herself and busts an Indo-US trafficking ring in Queens. And it's called I Kick and I Fly. So any which way I can, I continue and persist, because I really dream of a world in which no human being is bought or sold, and art can help me make others dream too.
I feel like we're going to never want this panel to end. You can just cancel your commitments for the rest of the day. But in earnest, there's art that you did that's actually in the room that is right behind you over here to my left. So afterward, perhaps some of you might want to go see some of that art. I want to come back to Amar, because part of what you're doing is championing historically overlooked women artists. And I wonder if you could ask, why is that important to you? What has that work looked like and felt like as you did it? And what is it like to sort of count the uncounted and elevate the art of those who we might not have seen before?
One of the things I've heard a lot while being here from remarkable leaders is, including Secretary Clinton, is they often were the only woman in the room full of men. So it's great to be one of the few men in a room full of women, but why really is to learn. And one of the groups I work with closely are the Guerrilla Girls, who are probably the leading feminist art collective of the last 30 years. And a statistic they published decades ago, which is pretty disturbing, was that over 90% of major museums had less than 10% of female artists in their permanent collection. So why, as somebody who's an arts patron and started a gallery and then ended up in a twist of events building one of the world's largest NFT operations, why would I contribute to that patriarchal system, that misogynistic system? So it's far more important to sit in a room full of women, full of LGBTQI members, learn from them, and then see what I can do to help these underrepresented communities.
I think it's amazing. One follow-up question. Have you ever had people say, why do something so hard?
Well, you have to live a life worth, of meaning, of importance, I think, and what's important to me is giving back. One of the things I've been working on, just to loop it in, is I am currently single-handedly funding the Indian Supreme Court case to abolish LGBT conversion therapy. And that's thank you. And I think within 18 to 24 months, it will be abolished, but that affects millions of people because there are millions and millions of members of the LGBTQI population in India, and unfortunately they are forced to endure electroshock therapy, amongst a whole range of other atrocities. But none of that, and I have to mention this, would be possible without Vital Voices. Because 2 years ago, I was learning about groups I could get involved with, and I saw that Vital Voices had honored a man, part of the Solidarity Council. I'm on the Vital Voices Solidarity Council, called Ravi Kant. And Ravi Kant is a human rights lawyer in India who focuses on women's rights. And he won the Supreme Court case, which ended honor killings. There were some big problems with honor killings which affected women. And I reached out to Ravi, and I said, and he hadn't taken an LGBT case before because you can't do everything. I said to him, please, I've seen you at this amazing, Vital Voices events. I've seen you honored by President Biden. Will you take my case? And he agreed. And so without Vital Voices and the network they have, I wouldn't be, really putting together the Supreme Court case to end LGBT conversion. So thank you. Thank you, Elise. Thank you to Vital Voices.
I look forward to hearing about all the change that happens from today's events, yesterday's events, tomorrow's events, so onward. Question from Milk. This year marks the 5th anniversary of the Women's March, and as you think about the challenges of the last several years and the work ahead, how do you use art to bring along those who see the world differently, right? How do you remove the distance between people and between worldviews?
That's a great question. And first, I just want to say I feel like we could invent a Vital Voices meditation app where we just like listen to all these like speeches and just like breathe. You'd be like, all will be well. Very good. Feel very good right now. How do we bring along people who think differently from us? I think, as we've mentioned, the heart is a very great place to start, and specific stories are very, very powerful. I think when I am in the space of should or us versus them, or I don't think any mind has been changed through anger. I think minds have been changed through emotional and deep and empathetic connection. And so with the art that I'm making and the fellow artists that I'm seeing in the women's movement and in the allies movement is that there are different forms of storytelling that go from 7 seconds to now like 2 hours long form of content. And the digital landscape has changed how I create art. I create art in the classic way where I was a fan of Bob Dylan and John Lennon, and so I do the classic way of songwriting. And then now I'm also creating with my fellow teammates like 7-second art pieces, believe it or not, and trying to tell these stories without this anger. I think anger is important for me to feel and express and to fully own. And then the next phase after that is a precious place where I'm in a place of calm, power, and there's an invitation where people can walk into a place and I don't need to change that person's mind. That is the key, and I've learned this through navigating my complicated relationship with my parents who struggle with my modern American woman choices as immigrant parents, right? I relate to everything you said, boss. But I was like, so I think that the not needing to change any minds, but sharing and trying to find something in common has been a really powerful place to start.
I think that's amazing. My father was Iraqi born, and one time I remember being maybe 10, 11, I said, I don't want to cook and clean. Why is everybody doing? Why are you telling me this? And he looked at me and goes, do you really think men and women are equal? And we had this beautiful moment where I realized he wasn't trying to be insulting at all. In the world he had come from, it was like telling him that cows go to the moon every morning at 9 and do yoga. You know, and so and it really was for us an opening moment that became a kind of a running joke between us. But I think just the listening piece to that and understanding where it came from. And then I joked, of course, the universe's curse was that I was his daughter. Right? You know, we had lots of funny jokes about that. But I think what you say is so moving. And I want to go to Bose, who started us talking about families. And you have worked at some of the biggest companies. You've also done storytelling in the most personal way that we're all about to see. What do you think, what is the most exciting innovation or the most exciting path, tool that you're thinking about right now for social impact?
You know, I've been thinking actually a lot about that because most of my career has been, you know, at a company or at a big platform and speaking out at people, right? And like I said, I've been doing it in 30 and 60-second increments primarily, hoping that it lands somewhere and then someone takes action because of the thing. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about consumption, you know, and intentional consumption. Because I would say that if we went around this room and asked, like, you know, you make choices probably about the food you eat, right? You're conscious about where it comes from, or like, you know, what's going in your body, or maybe even what's on your clothes. You know, this is vegan leather. I'm very conscious of that. Yes, I had to say it. In any case. But I've been thinking about other forms of consumption in entertainment, you know, and perhaps in artistry, as we've been, you know, discussing here, because we don't think enough about that. You know, like we said, I just recently left my job at Netflix, and so much of my Monday morning quarterbacking was in looking at the numbers daily, right, of people who had watched whatever thing. And then, of course, what happens, right? If something wasn't watched, you throw that out, you know? You go on to the thing that made a lot of people watch or engage, and you put more money against that. And, you know, as a marketer, I'm just looking at the little blip to make sure that what I'm doing is actually creating some ripple in the world. And so I've been thinking a lot about the intentionality of us as people, as consumers. And what is it that we're putting our energy against? You know, we often think about like, okay, well, that seems like a big problem over there. You know, Milk is creating beautiful music out of, you know, her spirit based on reactions to things that are going in the world. But are we intentionally consuming her music? You know, she just told us that she put music out on social media, and the second stanza, is it? Or the second chorus?
Yeah, the second verse, yeah.
Second verse is blank. Like, you know, I don't think I'm a songwriter, but I'm about to go write some lyrics. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. You know, I just encourage that perhaps we need to think about that as actually the revolution. You know, it's just like, how are we consuming? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Put the numbers behind that. You know, so the hours in your day that you're using to consume, and I don't want to hear it, okay, that you're like, oh, I don't have time to watch TV, I don't have time to watch film. That stuff is just, no, it's actually really important. Because there are a lot of people who are doing that, and your vote matters. It matters in that way too, not just in the political system and where you put your vote against a candidate, but the political system of entertainment. And so the stories that we are telling, the ways that these narratives are being told, why do you think that we keep making the same film again and again and again and again? Because you're not making a different choice. And so I'm pleading with you, every single person in this room, like we are not here accidentally, listening to this wonderful panel of people. I'll include myself in that. I'm wonderful as well.
Oh, yes.
But intentionality in our consumption of the art is extraordinarily important. And so I'm asking you that make a difference, make a change, even as you walk out of this room, for yourself and for the people around you. Encourage them to watch the things you want to see more of. Ask them to read the books that you think are interesting, that are going to make a difference, to support the authors. We got a 3 times New York Times bestseller right here. There's a 4th book coming. Please support that. You know, like all of the things that we are going to do are important enough to support. So I ask you to please be intentional in your consumption.
And I want to tie that back, what you just said, to something that Milk was saying earlier, which is something that Gutier said, which is also something, you know, that Amar said, which is, it's up to us. There's no one else. So if you're looking for the world to get better because someone from on high is going to come tell us that the moment's going to change, it won't. Right? It starts with every single person taking actions that move us together in small, small steps towards something that is better, that is different, that looks different. And so, you know, it's such a joy to be here with each of you. And I want to go to you, Ruchira, which is that, you know, there's no doubt that significant global challenges face us, and you've tackled and made personal some of the biggest ones, some of the ones that people sometimes say, oh, that's too tough for me. Oh, I don't know about trafficking. I don't know. Where do you think we should be focusing efforts? Where are you focusing efforts as you pursue a world that looks different? And with voices, vital voices, maybe all kinds of voices, right, that we don't necessarily hear all the time.
You know, my work on sex trafficking will continue as long as I live, because it's always going to be unfinished business. And you did speak just previous to our panel about slavery and how, you know, one person built an ally and that ally built another ally and slavery was abolished. So I think if I can keep building alliances, I can definitely make a dent with all the friends and allies that I have to end the sale of girls and boys for sexual exploitation. And Vital Voices has been a huge ally in that journey. But now I feel when, you know, the whole world seems to be threatened by democracy. And what does a world look like without democracy? I think the most impacted will be women and the girls that I work with, because they are as Gandhi ji would say, that they are the most vulnerable of all human beings. The 15-year-old in a brothel who was put there because she had no food, no housing, no clothes on her back maybe, and of course no access to school or child protection. So how can we think about holding on to the democracy we have and make it better? And that rests on uprooting hierarchy, which we normalize at home. Because it's at home that we first realize that it's all right for one class of human beings to order and one to obey, and one class of human beings to really push for give approval and another to take approval. So gender actually digs a trench into our brains into which all other hierarchies fall. And we go out into the world looking for like the strong man as the leader, because we see a head of the family as the symbol of power. We don't want what we used to call the gentleman as the leader or the gentlewoman as the leader. We want someone who's strong, who can stretch their chest out and scream, and we think bullying is a form of leadership. So we keep replicating that power, and we have to change that to save our bodies. You know, forget anything else, and then to save ourselves from hunger and to fulfill our full potential as human beings. So I think that's what I would like to really focus my energies on, is to protect our bodies and fight for more freedom, uproot hierarchies.
Yeah, years ago I was working on child marriage story and talking about it as a national security a global development issue. And there was somebody on this panel who said, I just don't understand it. Like, why do you have to be so passionate about this? You know, and I said, well, he said, this is local custom. I said, well, you know, if an 11-year-old girl who's had 4 years of schooling knows she shouldn't marry a 35-year-old man, then shouldn't every one of you in these nice suits and nice rooms with water and power and light know that we're all better off if she has her way and has her rights and goes to school? And I think it just like goes back to whose voice is heard. Yeah. And all of you, I mean, I think Bose with your books and your messages to us, and Merck with your music, Amar with your art, Gutier with your films, you give us a path to be inspired and move forward. And as we move forward with our weekend and celebrate this, I want to thank all of you for being part of this discussion, and I want to thank the 4 of you for lifting us up and spurring us on. I think intentional consumption, you vote with your clicks, the whole notion of the selling of innocence, Amar, do art, and then you all have to become music writers and go to Follow Milk tonight. We all have our homework. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much.